I got to try that. Okay. Well, yeah, I got to try that. Go down to the deli. We're coming back now.
Okay.
Some of you on Facebook, you see what they talk about between her. We're talking about Jerry Bonkowski of NBCSports.com and I, Marky, Billson on Tri-City Sports Now. Not just about racing, but right now we're talking about our favorite acquired taste delicacies, that sort of thing. And so pate and boiled peanuts, and we're trying to keep it regional. The 12 different styles of American barbecue, and why St. Louis ribs seem to be just a little too chewy for me, but the Kansas City ones are great. But anyway, here we go. Well, you'd say something negative about St. Louis being from Chicago. Jerry Bonkowski of NBC.
I love St. Louis.
All right. So I take it then you're a White Sox fan.
Well, no, but I like St. Louis.
All right. No, I buy that. I can buy that. The arch there and such. And, of course, in Johnson City, there have been Cardinals Farm Club continuously since 75, and even many years before that after some affiliations with the Yanks and Phillies. But anyway, let's go back to NASCAR here. And, you were talking a little bit about, you've got friends in PR. I was saying, I did think Bristol handled the weather as best as they possibly could. We're now sort of enjoying the after effects, by the way, here, Jerry. I was driving down Jackson Love Highway into the station, and I saw snow-capped mountains, which reminded me actually, like, it was suddenly like we were in Washington State. I was looking at that. I thought, wow, and that's something we normally don't have around here. Anyway, I just want to point this out, though. One of the things that does bother me is how NASCAR doesn't release attendance figures. And to me, it's like at Bristol, they could not do enough to tell us that there were 157,000 fans in that yard to see Tennessee and Virginia Tech 2 years ago. But now, you got to take the bitter with the sweet. You got to tell, okay, how many people did brave the cold? How many people came back the next day? I mean, I want to know these things. Why doesn't NASCAR release the figures? Are they that afraid of the races that used to sell out now at half capacity and the negative backlash? Is that it, or why don't they announce the attendance?
That's a good question. I mean, and it also kind of ties into something that just happened, what was it, 2 years ago, I think it was? Not only did they not announce the attendance, they also have stopped announcing the purses, how much drop money a driver earned in a particular race. It's just a policy. It's a policy in NASCAR. I mean, IndyCar, I believe, does not announce the attendance either. So, but I believe they do the money, or maybe I think they might have stopped too now. I think about it, but it's just a policy. I don't understand why they don't, but smarter people than I have made that decision, and there's obviously has to be a reason why. And I think that NASCAR, IndyCar, NHRA, any major motorsport in the U.S. It's to satisfy the curiosity of the media, maybe some fans, but really the whole big scheme of things. Are we talking about how many people did not show up, or how few people showed up, or are we going to talk about the race? To me, the race is the most prominent thing that there is out there, and we have a small crowd, but we go on because we got a great race. That's kind of the way I kind of quantify it.
Well, no, I get that, but I do think that there is, we're now in this era where we have to talk about the TV rating, the attendance, how popular this is. You write online, how many clicks do you get, Jerry? How many people are listening to this show or watching on Facebook? We're in that world, and I don't necessarily think it's healthy, even if the attendance is bad, to keep it hidden. And we can see all the empty seats, and maybe we just had a number, or if we realized that there were 10,000 hardy souls that came back or something, we tried to, find out who they were, who was willing to sit in the rain one day, the cold the next, and hopefully they didn't catch cold the next day, that's somebody to highlight. That's somebody that you get it back on. And I just give you another, just using BMS. We talk a lot about, Battle of Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia Tech. I'm not sure you're aware, but the next week, East Tennessee State, Johnson City's FCS team, played a football game there. Very exciting one against Western Carolina, big comeback victory. And they drew 13,000 and change.
Yes.
And,
Exactly, right.
okay, now there are two ways to look at that. One is, that was the record attendance to ever go to an ETSU home game. The second one was, it was also a gauge, in my point of looking at this, that if we were ever thinking about ETSU to go the levels that, say, Appalachian State or Georgia Southern have, where they are now FBS football programs and not FCS teams, or trying to get to another conference, maybe it's a little premature because you didn't draw 15,000 fans, and that's what you got to do to play at the FBS level. So in that case, it was a very accurate gauge, Jerry. It was a way that we could really talk about, what the support is for the football program, how to get more. Or was it enough as it was right there? There was a lot of conversation. I thought that was healthier than it would be if you just said, not give an attendance figure. That's why I think it's important to have the attendance figures. And, yeah.
I see where you're coming from with that, Marky, and, I agree with you to a certain extent, but at the same time, when you're a major multi-billion-dollar entity like NASCAR or IndyCar or NHRA is, and this day and age, where it's so difficult to attract sponsors and things like that, do you really want to put out there a number that a potential sponsor might say, oh, well, they only drew X amount of fans to the race, maybe it's not worth it for me to have my company become a sponsor. So it's kind of a dual-edged sword, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I mean, when we try to sell this station, they want to know, and we're not WLS up there or anything. Our book in Johnson City, Tennessee is not the same in Chicago. And let's face it, I mean, in Chicago, you're going to sell radio advertising based on ratings, based on agencies and all that. Right. A lot of what we do here, we're a top 100 market, but we're not top 25. So a lot of it is still done, people handshakes, this sort of thing, other than necessarily straight ratings. And where I'm going with that, though, is that, a lot of times, even here, we hear, well, how many listeners do you have? I went to a sports bar the other day in a neighboring community. You want to know, I need to know how many listeners you have in this actual community. Sadly, I couldn't tell them. And that's where having those figures really, I think it's important, even if the news isn't quite so hot. Because, there are a lot of ways you can look at this. I mean, there were 5,000 people that went to, went to both days. There were 10,000 people that went to both days. Well, those are the guys you want to do features on for the future about being great NASCAR fans or something.
Right.
Right.
No, I think you're saying. Right.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, just speaking of this, we were talking a little bit about scheduling. I had my cynical friend could not figure out why Bristol wasn't run in June now after the weather here that we had. But I did read some old stories that this few months ago, Jackson, Mississippi was kind of looking at a racetrack. Have you heard anything new since the end of last year when the Jackson City Council was talking about potentially, hey, maybe we could have a NASCAR track here in Jackson? Do you think that could come to fruition?
I never say never, but I've been in this game long enough, and I've seen so many episodes, I guess, of either municipalities, like cities, saying they're going to build a track, and it never comes to fruition.
Yeah.
I've seen, I'm one place, I'm not picking on them, don't get me wrong, I'm not picking on them, but there was a huge press conference in California at Fontana, maybe about 12, 13 years ago, when, now it's on a blank on the family name,
hold on, I'm trying to see if I can't get Fontana family on a real quick Google search for you. I know this is riveting radio.
The Wayans family.
Okay.
And, they brought out, was it Damon Wayans and Marlon Wayans, I think it was, two other ones. And they were extremely adamant that they were going to either
Yeah, I know 15 to 20 years ago there was talk of an indoor track in Pittsburgh, and they just
That's right. I remember that.
they never could get the funding for it, which was a little surprising. I know that because I know NASCAR ratings in Pittsburgh are very high, or at least they were around the turn of the century or so, or the third highest. I was told that sort of thing. Talking to Jerry Bonkowski of NBCSports.com, let me go back to yesterday's race. I was impressed with Jimmy Johnson. Maybe he didn't have quite the car to win the race, but, he was always in the top 10. Never, you could tell in those final laps he wasn't going to compete against, Larson and Busch. But is this the first step of the comeback of a guy who's really been underachieving, Jimmy Johnson?
I've been saying this all this season so far, Marky. I mean, there's just, you have to wonder about what was going on with not only Johnson, but the whole Hendrick Motorsports organization. They were just struggling. And, it's very rare that you see all four drivers struggle, and especially a guy who's won 7 championships. Of course, they went to the Camaro body style. That could be, and I still think that is part of the reason why Hendrick Motorsports has struggled. Then we see Johnson finishing third yesterday, and we saw Bowman finishing fifth. So, I've been saying Jimmy's going to come back. I mean, he's going to come back in a big way. Would not be surprised to see him win, in the next couple of races at all. He might actually knock off a couple of wins in a row, too, as well. So, not a big surprise to me. It's about time, though. That's what I can say that.
Well, Chevy, by the way, they won the Daytona 500. So, I mean, I guess the implication here, we've talked a little bit about this on our time together, is that maybe the Camaros are a little bit better on the super speedway, and the traditional, the sedans, the Fusion and the Camrys be a little bit better when, you are trying to bump and grind, and maybe having a little bit more metal around the car is desirable or so.
Well, here's some breaking news for you. I don't know if you heard about this morning, but Ford announced that they were going to bring the Mustang into the NASCAR Cup Series the next year. So we're going to have the Mustang and the Camaro next year, too. So, and then the rumors I keep hearing is that Dodge is going to come back in 2020 with the Challenger. So, this is a good time to be a NASCAR fan, especially if you're a fan of the pony cars.
I didn't see that, but the Mustang and the Camaro, I've always said I don't want to hear about Red Sox Cowboys, about Notre Dame, Southern California, or for that matter, ETSU versus Chattanooga. I think the classic American rivalry is Ford versus Chevy. And it goes to sports, business, everything. I mean, I don't think some of these yokels that think you're less of a person if you drive a Ford or a Dodge or whatever. Of course, that's going a little bit by the wayside, at least I hope, with maturity and such. But, that is the classic rivalry. Even when you're 5 years old, you care about Ford versus Chevy. And that if you have Mustang, I didn't hear that, no. Thank you. That one got past, so thank you for the scoop. But yes, Mustang going against Camaro, that's going to be big. But then, if you do have Challenger, and for that matter, Camry, you would have more sedans. It would be pony cars versus sedans in the future as well. So that also comes in very exciting. I mean, a few sportier cars, but nobody says the Challenger isn't sporty. So.
Well, all I can say is this, Marky. If Dodge does come back and they do use the Challenger to go up against the Ford Mustang and the Chevy Camaro, it's almost a given. The first thing you're going to hear somebody say is, "Hey, that thing got a Hemi?"
Yeah, absolutely. I love those old ads and all that. I love them here. Hey, I got an off-the-wall question. And this is where it comes from. We're talking at the beginning about Ryan Blaney wrecking early. Maybe he had the dominant car. But although the rules didn't allow it, in the back of my mind, I started saying, you know what? This isn't a suspended baseball game. How many times have you seen a wreck, and then just to get those points, they work on the pits, and a guy comes on 30 laps down to, run the rest of the race and finish 30th or whatever, depending on what the rest of the field does. What would have stopped? I mean, why do you think it would have been unethical or illegal for a Blaney to say, okay, the backup car, can you get it to Bristol here overnight? thanks, we're running, I guess, 100 laps down, but I'm getting those points. What would have stopped that from occurring?
Simple, a NASCAR rule.
Yeah, but I mean, do you agree with that rule is what I'm asking?
Yeah.
If you have delayed game. Okay, tell me why here.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the old saying, run what you brung kind of thing, and, if he wrecks out, is it really fair to, the other cars that wreck out or can't get repaired or whatever the case may be, to have a guy just because of geographical proximity to the Penske shop in Mooresville, North Carolina, which is 3 hours away roughly, to have him come back with a new car when he wrecked out with the old car. I mean, you just can't do that. I mean, that's kind of like pinch hitting the same guy twice.
Yeah, I thought about that. I thought about a suspended baseball game. You couldn't bring back in a pitcher or something.
Exactly.
I mean, that sort of thing. But at the same time, I also thought, well, there isn't a baseball rule that says you can't come back after you've been taken out. And so if this is the same race,
I believe there is.
Okay. But what I'm saying is that how many times have you seen wrecked cars? They work on them in the pits. They come out without a fender or something like that. They're down 50 laps or whatever, but they've complete the race and they finish whatever they finish, 33rd or what have you.
Right.
How many times do you see that? So by that same concept, now this is in effect, since there is a delay, your ability to have it, and you mentioned a geographical preference, depending on where the shop and the track is, I get that, but it would be the opportunity to say, okay, let's, we're fixing the car. We're having the backup car in here now since we have an extra day. That was just a thought that I had.
Well, yeah, there is one thing, though. You have to remember this. This is very poignant to Bristol because it's one of the, all tracks do, but very keen to Bristol just because of the way the infield is and how close the cars are together and trucks are together in the infield, that kind of thing. You cannot work on a car once it's wrecked. Even if you have it, the race has been postponed because of rain, it's carried over to the next day, the cars are impounded, period.
Okay.
The NASCAR officials will not let teams, unless it's an extremely rare entity where a NASCAR team may give permission to a certain team to do something. But I mean, on an overall level, you have to keep that playing level, the playing surface level, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you can't allow teams to fix things or change things or whatever just because we're being rained out one day and we're going to have to race the next day. So, and I give Bristol a lot of credit because I've been at Bristol a number of times and I've seen where teams have tried to do that very thing where the cars are impounded and somebody wanted to do some minor work on it, and those NASCAR officials, they're literally Johnny on the spot. They see somebody going and doing something they shouldn't be doing, they're going to find it. They're going to let you know real quickly, stop it or you're out of the race.
There you go. I can't really argue with. I've always kind of thought that when I did see in the past, that guy coming back 50 laps down or something and just rolling on the shoulder on the road, does he really have to be there? Isn't this a chance for being that slow poke that creates the wreck that knocks out a Ryan Blaney, that sort of thing? But the thought occurred when they had a day out there. That would be feasible in all this. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Food City 500, it used to be that Jeff Gordon was the Rainbow Warrior. I'll say this. Now Kyle Busch certainly is the Rainbow Warrior, at least in Bristol. And guess what? I guess Kyle Busch now, he can go after Harvick, who won the 3 races in a row. And, we've got that Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick rivalry back in that storyline this NASCAR season. So that's something to look forward to. Jerry, it's always a pleasure. Hope we can do this again on Friday. And I will talk to you then. And by the way, check out some of his great indie sport writing. Follow Jerry Bonkowski on Twitter. Has a lot of great stuff. He'll tweet stuff about NASCAR races that maybe he doesn't even have the byline on it, but one of his co-writers at NBCSports.com. You'll stay on top of motorsports by following Jerry Bonkowski on NBCSports.com. And I've got some baseball talk. There's a big game in Johnson City tonight. Tri-City Sports Now. Okay.